She was forced to betray the love of her life, at the very moment he needed her most. Threatened by power, trapped by fear, Isla walked away, pregnant, alone, and carrying the child of a love she was never allowed to keep. 6 years later, fate brings them face to face again. But now he's a billionaire, and she's hiding the secret that could shatter everything. This isn't just a love story, it's survival, it's betrayal, it's redemption, and it all begins now. Sit back and let the story unfold. Isla Brown sat in the cold, sterile visiting hall of the federal prison, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The air smelled of metal, disinfectant, and hopelessness. Her chest rose and fell in uneven breaths as she tried to steady herself, but the tremor in her fingers betrayed her. Every sound, the shuffle of boots, the clang of distant bars, the low hum of fluorescent lights, only made her heart pound harder. Then came the sound she dreaded. Heavy footsteps. The prison warden appeared, stern-faced, his hand gripping the chain of the man he escorted. Aran. Shackled wrists, orange prison uniform, the faint rattle of steel echoing with each step. The warden dragged him forward and placed him in the seat directly across from Isla. His eyes, cold and official, cut through the tension as he barked, "You have 5 minutes. No touching." And then he was gone. For a moment the world seemed to shrink into silence. Isla sat frozen, staring at the man in chains. Aran's gaze met hers, not hardened like one would expect, but soft, filled with tenderness, concern, and a kind of love that seemed unshaken by his surroundings. Even shackled, he carried himself with a quiet strength. To Isla, it was almost unbearable. He looked at her as if she was his entire world. His lips parted, his voice low but steady, asking how she was, hoping she was okay. The sound of his voice alone carried comfort, but Isla forced a smile that felt heavy on her face. She answered quickly, her words spilling out like stones in her throat. The police had told her he could be facing up to 7 years. The man Aran had beaten was injured badly. Aran's face didn't flinch. He simply nodded, his voice calm, almost resigned. He explained that under normal circumstances, he would never have done such a thing. But that night had been different. That man had been a threat to her. He would rather spend years behind bars than watch her get hurt. Aran leaned forward slightly, the chain between his wrists clinking as he moved. His eyes softened. He said it didn't matter what happened to him as long as she was safe. His father, powerful as he was, would try to find a way out of this, and if not, Aran would endure, he would behave, earn parole, and when he walked out of those gates, he wanted to marry her. The words hung heavy in the air, a promise, a plea, a vision of a future he clung to. Isla's throat tightened. She saw the hope in his eyes, the certainty of a man who had risked everything for her. And yet she knew what she had to say. Her voice cracked slightly as the words fell from her lips, like glass breaking on stone. "Aran, let's break up." The room seemed to stop breathing. Even the buzz of the fluorescent lights faded into silence. Aran blinked, almost in disbelief. His lips twitched into a weak, nervous smile. He thought he had misheard, thought she was playing a cruel joke. "That's an expensive joke, Isla. Stop it," he said, his laugh tense, his eyes searching her face for the truth. But there was no joke. She looked at him with eyes full of restrained compassion, and yet the steel of her decision showed. She told him what they had was beautiful, but it was over. She couldn't wait 7 years for him to walk free. She was young. She had her life ahead of her. She needed someone who could provide, protect, stand by her without the stain of crime. Someone like Chan, her old college friend, wealthy, stable, everything Aran couldn't be from inside a prison. The ground beneath Aran's soul seemed to collapse. His heart pounded in his ears, and his voice grew hoarse as he shook his head. "That's a lie," he whispered, his chains rattling as he leaned forward. He told her she loved him. He knew she did. He asked if something had happened to her on the way here, if someone had forced her to say this. But Isla slammed her hands on the table, her knuckles white, her voice trembling as she tried to stop the tears from spilling. "I can't be with a criminal," she forced out. The words cut through Aran's chest like a blade. He had gone to prison for protecting her, and yet that very act was the reason she was leaving. Isla avoided his gaze, fighting to hold herself together, but the truth was clear. This was real. Aran sat back slowly, as if the very air had been stolen from his lungs. The chains clinked softly with his movements, but the sound was drowned out by the hollow echo in his chest. Before Aran could respond, the sharp sound of boots echoed once more. The prison warden stepped back into the room, his presence cutting through the fragile, collapsing moment. His voice was final, merciless. "Time's up." The words felt like a blade, severing whatever thread remained between them. Isla rose to her feet, her body stiff, her legs trembling beneath her. She turned her head slowly toward Aran, her voice trembling but deliberate as she whispered, "Goodbye, Aran Noe." The sound of his name from her lips was almost unbearable. Aran's eyes widened in panic. His body surged forward against the chains, desperation spilling out of him like blood from a wound. "Please, don't do this." His voice cracked, raw with pain. He reached out instinctively, desperate to touch her, to remind her of the warmth of his hand that had once been her safety, her comfort, her world. But the warden shoved him back, his wrists yanked down by steel. Aran strained against the pull, his voice rising into a cry that shook the hollow walls. "Isla, don't leave me. You can take everything else, my freedom, my future, but not you. Please, not you." The guards pressed him hard against the wall, their grips like iron, yet his voice still thundered, echoing through the corridors. It was the sound of a man breaking, the sound of love being torn from his chest. He wanted to run, to remind her of every memory, every promise, every piece of himself he had given her. But the weight of the chains held him, crushing him against the concrete as his cries bled into the cold air. Isla kept walking. Her body was rigid, but the moment the visiting room door closed behind her, her facade shattered. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stumbled forward into the general corridor. She pressed her trembling hands against her mouth to muffle the sobs threatening to spill out, her chest heaving violently. Her lips quivered, her vision blurred, and her heart felt like it was being torn apart piece by piece. And then she froze. From the corner of the corridor came a figure moving with calm, deliberate steps. Chairman Noe, Aran's father. His tailored suit seemed almost too clean for the grim prison walls. His face carried no warmth, only an icy contempt that sliced straight through her. His eyes locked onto her like a hawk spotting prey. He stopped in front of her, his voice sharp, dripping with disdain. "Is it done? Are you finally out of my son's life?" Isla's sobs broke as she looked up at him. She nodded between the tears, forcing the words out like a demand. "Now, get him out of that prison, like you promised." Chairman Noe's lips curved into something cold, not a smile, but a confirmation of his control. "Of course." "He's still my son," he said, his tone calm, yet laced with venom. Then his eyes narrowed, his words striking her like a lash. "But if it weren't for you, I would never have had to take this measure. You were the anomaly, the weakness, the reason he was disowned." Isla's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him in disbelief, her mind spinning. "You mean you did this? You framed your own son because of me? Because I wasn't born into wealth? Because I'm not Korean?" Chairman Noe's voice thundered, the truth crashing down like a hammer. "Yes." The word echoed in the corridor, final and merciless. His eyes burned with a twisted pride as he continued. "There is no world where I allow the Noe bloodline to be polluted with inferior stock. My son is the heir to an empire. His future is not with you, but with someone worthy, a woman of equal power, equal blood. That is the path I have chosen for him, and I will not let you corrupt it." Isla's heart pounded violently, her tears mingling with anger and horror. He leaned closer, his voice a low growl, every word deliberate. "Stay away from my son. If I can put him in prison once, I can do it again, and next time I won't let him out. Don't test me. Don't test the lines I'm willing to cross. I will destroy you and every shred of family you have left if you come near him again." His eyes raked over her trembling figure, then flicked with finality toward the prison door. And one more thing. I don't want to see you anywhere in Busan. Vanish, or I'll make you vanish." With that, he turned sharply, his shoes clicking against the polished floor as he walked back toward the direction Isla had come from, toward the son he had betrayed. Isla remained frozen in the corridor, her entire body shaking, her tears flowing unchecked. The truth had struck her harder than Aran's cries. The man who claimed to protect his legacy had crushed his own son's future, all because of her. And now she was alone, trapped between love and fear, between a man's devotion and another man's ruthless power. Isla sat motionless on the hard bench, her body trembling as sobs tore through her. The image of Aran, shackled, crying out her name, begging her not to leave, would not leave her mind. It played over and over, each memory like a dagger twisting in her chest. She had shattered the heart of the only man who had ever truly loved her, and the weight of it pressed down until she could barely breathe. Her tears blurred the cold prison corridor before her eyes, but her thoughts dragged her backward to the night that had led to this hell. It was just a month earlier, a night she could never forget. She had stepped outside her small apartment building, carrying a bag of waste to the bins at the back. The alley was dim, the streetlight flickering, shadows stretching like claws across the wall. She was alone, or so she thought. From the darkness, a man emerged, rough, menacing, with eyes full of cruelty. He cornered her swiftly, his words dripping with vile intent. His fists were clenched, ready to strike, as he snarled threats and demanded what no woman should ever be asked for. Isla froze, her heart pounding so loud it deafened her. She tried to move, tried to scream, but fear locked her body. His hands grabbed at her roughly, pulling, prodding, trying to force himself where he had no right to be. She thought it was the end. And then came Aran. He appeared like fire cutting through darkness, charging forward with fury burning in his eyes. He ripped the thug away from her and unleashed his rage blow after blow, his fists fueled not by hatred but by desperate protection. The man crumpled beneath him, beaten to the ground. Isla's breath shook violently, her body collapsing in terror and relief. But then, like actors waiting for their cue, the police stormed from the shadows. Not to help her, not to stop the assault. They had been there the whole time, watching, waiting for Aran to strike. They wrestled him down, yanking his arms behind his back, the sound of cold metal cuffs clicking shut as Isla screamed his name. That was the night everything was stolen, and deep in her gut, she knew who had orchestrated it. Chairman No, the man who called himself a father but moved like a tyrant. Her tears slowed as her hand drifted instinctively to her stomach. She rubbed it gently, her lips quivering as she whispered, "Whatever it takes, I will keep you safe." Because what Chairman Noe did not know, what even Aran did not know, was that Isla was pregnant. She had never told a soul. If a man could orchestrate his own son's downfall to rid himself of her presence, what would he do if he discovered she carried the bloodline he despised, an illegitimate heir, born from the love he condemned? Chairman Noe was too powerful, too ruthless, too unpredictable. He could crush them both before the child ever took its first breath. So Isla made her vow there in that prison corridor. If she could not keep Aran, she would keep their child. If she could not protect their love, she would protect its living proof, even if it cost her everything. Her tears dried, replaced by a cold determination that steeled her trembling frame. Meanwhile, inside the prison's restricted wing, the warden stiffened as Chairman Noe entered. His posture dropped immediately into deference, bowing slightly before leading the older man toward Aran's cell. The clank of the lock echoed as the door slid open. Aran sat inside, chains clinking faintly with his movements. His eyes were red, his spirit visibly fractured, yet he lifted his head when he heard his father's voice. Chairman Noe stepped in, his polished shoes clicking against the floor, his smirk sharp and cruel. "She's gone, hasn't she?" he said, his voice slicing through the silence. "I warned you. I told you she was a gold digger, but you would not listen. You chose a low life over your father's word." Aran's jaw tightened. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but no words left his lips. The betrayal in his father's tone was louder than chains. Chairman Noe folded his hands behind his back, his expression cold as steel. "You are my only son, my heir. Everything I have built, everything the Noe name stands for, belongs to you, but not if you throw it away chasing trash. You were born for empires, Aran, not for her." The words reverberated inside the cell, sharp, deliberate, a father's authority wrapped in venom. And Aran sat, torn between the agony of losing the woman he loved and the fury of realizing just how deep his father's hand had reached into his ruin. Chairman Noe's voice was smooth, almost too calm, but every word was laced with control. "You can walk out of here, Aran. You can reclaim what is rightfully yours, but only if you do as I say. Forget Isla. Forget her name, her face, everything she meant to you. Chase her again and I'll make sure prison becomes your permanent home." Aran sat there in silence, the chains heavy on his wrists, but heavier still was the memory of Isla's words. "I can't be with a criminal." The sound of it burned into his soul. She hadn't just left him, she had called him the very thing he swore he wasn't. A criminal. To her, that was the end of who he was. Pain turned into fuel. His heart, broken and bleeding, hardened into resolve. If that was the choice she made, then he would rise so high that she would see how wrong she was. He would not remain the man she abandoned in chains. He would become something greater. Slowly, with fire returning to his eyes, Aran looked up at his father and gave a single nod. "Fine," he said. "I'll take your deal." It was not surrender. It was determination. He would carve his own path, no matter how much it cost. 6 years later. The world was a different place, and so was he. In a towering glass office worth millions, sunlight spilled across pristine floors and sleek black furniture polished to perfection. Every surface gleamed, every angle designed with precision and taste, a kingdom of wealth and power. And in the middle of it, moving quietly, almost invisible against the shine, was Isla Brown. Her hair was tied back, her simple uniform spotless. She worked with steady hands, dusting shelves, polishing glass, ensuring not a single fingerprint stained the empire someone else had built. Each movement was practiced, careful, a rhythm she had lived with for years. Then her eyes caught something on the desk. A glossy magazine, its bold headline screaming from the front page. Her breath caught in her throat. On it was him, Aran Noe. His photograph filled the cover, sharp in a perfectly tailored suit, his black eyes piercing even through the page. The caption read, "Heir to the Noe fortune, now a billionaire himself." Isla's fingers lingered on the page. She didn't read the words. She didn't need to. She simply stared at the face she had not seen in 6 years. 6 long years, yet she could still feel him, his hand against her skin, the warmth of his lips against her neck, the fire in his gaze when he looked at her as though she was his entire world. The memory was as vivid as if he had just kissed her yesterday. Her chest tightened. Carefully, almost reverently, she tore the page from the magazine, folded it neatly, and slipped it into her pocket, close to her heart. Then, forcing her breath steady, she bent back to her work, her body trembling ever so slightly. Suddenly, a burst of footsteps broke the quiet. Nari, her closest friend and confidant, came hurrying toward her with excitement lighting her face. For 6 years, Nari had been more than just a friend. She had been family, Amelia's godmother, protector, and companion in Isla's struggles. "Isla!" Nari said breathlessly, her voice filled with barely contained enthusiasm. "Have you heard? The billionaire who just acquired this company. He's coming today. The whole building is buzzing. Even CEOs from other billion-dollar companies will be here. This could be our chance, Isla. We should look our best. Who knows who might notice us?" Her eyes sparkled with hope, but Isla only shook her head gently, her hands still busy with her cloth and polish. "Not me, Nari. I just want to finish quickly. I need to get home to Amelia." Her voice softened when she said her daughter's name. Amelia, the one constant in her life. Nari sighed, her expression tender. She understood. She had been there since the beginning, holding the tiny baby in her arms, promising to love her as though she were her own. She would do anything to make sure Amelia was safe, cared for, and loved. Still, her eyes narrowed playfully at Isla. But Isla, you can't hide forever. You can't bury yourself in work and expect love to just fall into your lap. You'll never find a good man if you lock yourself away. Isla only smiled faintly, her eyes dim with secrets she could never share. Love wasn't what she was searching for anymore. She had already had it and lost it. What remained now was survival, and the little girl waiting for her at home. The glass doors of the towering building swung open, and the air outside erupted with noise. Cameras flashed in rapid bursts, reporters shouted over one another, and security guards formed a tight wall to push the crowd back. And then he appeared, Aran, tall, composed, and untouchable, the youngest billionaire in South Korea. Every movement he made seemed calculated, every glance sharp, every step heavier with the weight of power and scrutiny. Excitement rippled through the room. "He's here! Oh my God, it's Aran, the famous billionaire!" Nari nearly squealed, her voice breaking with awe. To her this was a rare spectacle, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to catch a glimpse of a man who now ruled the business world. But Isla didn't even look up. Her heart and mind were elsewhere. She had already packed her cleaning cloths, neatly placed her supplies back into their cart, and pulled out her phone. Her world was not in this glittering tower, nor in the shadow of billionaires. It was in a small apartment waiting for her. "Hey baby," she whispered into the phone, her voice soft with love. "Mama just finished work. I'll be home soon." On the other end, Amelia's little voice filled with laughter, eager to share every detail of the cartoon she had just watched. Isla smiled as she walked out of the office building, her eyes tender, her steps quick. She wanted nothing more than to get home and hold her daughter in her arms. Meanwhile, just a few rooms away, Aran sat in the center of a press conference that had spiraled out of control. Reporters surrounded him, firing questions like arrows. "What are your immediate plans for the newly acquired company? What strategies will you use once you take over the full Noe fortune?" At first the questions were expected, business, strategy, money, but then they shifted, cutting into the personal, the places he rarely allowed anyone to see. "Is it true that you had an abusive father? Why haven't you been seen with a girlfriend or fiancé despite your wealth and status? Are the rumors true that you're incapable of holding a real relationship?" The barrage was endless. Faces leaned forward, microphones shoved closer, cameras capturing every flicker of discomfort. Aran felt a familiar tightening in his chest. They didn't care about the answers. They didn't care about the man. To them, he was just a headline waiting to be twisted, another story to sell. He raised a hand, calm but firm. "That will be all for today." His tone carried no emotion, but his eyes betrayed the storm beneath. He stood, leaving the flashes and shouts behind, his security detail flanking him as he pushed out into the quieter hallway. And that was when it happened. Isla walked past him, head tilted down, phone pressed to her ear, voice soft as she whispered back to her daughter. She didn't notice him. Not the man the world was watching, not the billionaire whose name was on every magazine cover, not even the one she once knew. And Aran, lost in his own thoughts, didn't notice her either. Their questions cut like knives, he thought bitterly as he walked. They don't care about the heart of the person they interrogate. All they want is blood, scandal, and the next juicy story to feed the world. Two souls, once bound, passed each other in the same hallway, so close they could almost brush shoulders, and yet the weight of years of choices and of secrets kept them apart, as though an invisible wall still stood between them. It wasn't until Isla had already disappeared into the sea of employees and office workers, making their way toward the exits, that the thought struck Aran like a bolt of lightning. A face, a presence, something too familiar to ignore. His steps faltered, his breath caught. For a moment, the bustling hallway blurred around him. Isla, he thought. The name echoed like a ghost in his mind. The figure he had just seen, her soft voice drifting faintly over the hum of a phone call, was no ordinary passerby. She was the ghost that had haunted his nights for 6 long years, the woman he had loved, the woman who had abandoned him, the woman whose memory still clung to his soul like a scar that refused to fade. In an instant, the composure of South Korea's youngest billionaire shattered. Aran surged forward, startling his security team. His long strides carried urgency, desperation, an emotion his men had never seen in him before. "Find her," he barked, his tone sharp with command. "The woman who just walked past, don't let her leave the building." Confused, his men scattered down the hall, weaving through the flow of workers and guests. But Isla was already gone. By the time they reached the exit, the sliding glass doors whispered shut behind her, and she was lost in the crowd outside. Aran stopped at the entrance, chest rising and falling with restrained fury, his jaw clenched tight, his fists curled at his sides. He had been so sure. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't memory. He had seen her. Toby, his chief of security, rushed up to him, slightly out of breath. "Sir?" Aran's voice was calm now, but it carried the weight of command that allowed no refusal. "Go through the company files. Every employee who worked today, check their names. I want to know if there's anyone named Isla Brown. Start there." Toby nodded quickly, already pulling out his phone to give the order. But for Isla, far away from the tension inside the gleaming building, her reality was something far less glamorous. Her paychecks from the cleaning company barely kept her afloat. Most months the money was gone before it arrived. Rent, food, utilities, Amelia's school needs. Bills stacked up, reminders slipped under her door, late notices piling one after the other. Every day was a fight to keep her little girl safe and comfortable. To survive, Isla worked beyond the company's assignments. She had taken on side jobs wherever she could find them. Among them, cleaning for the Brandon family, a wealthy household that had, over time, become something like a refuge. She had begun with them years ago when she was still pregnant with Amelia. Instead of turning her away, they had welcomed her with kindness, even paying her more than the cleaner before her. Over time, she had come to rely on that income as more than just money. It was stability, consistency, a place where she wasn't treated as disposable. But all good things had an end. Just last week, Mr. and Mrs. Brandon had sat her down and gently explained that they were moving overseas. They had thanked her for her loyalty, expressed their regret, even given her a bonus as a parting gift. But no kindness could soften the blow. When the door closed behind her that day, Isla had walked away with her heart sinking. Another source of income gone. Another piece of stability taken from her. She prayed that night, tears soaking her pillow while Amelia slept peacefully beside her. She begged for an opening, for a chance, for something that could ease the crushing weight she carried on her own. So when her cleaning company called with an offer the very next day, Isla felt the timing was more than coincidence. It was an answered prayer. An overtime shift had opened for Sunday night, and the employer had specifically requested her by name. The pay was higher than anything she had made in weeks. Her chest had tightened with relief. Finally, a break. They must have seen how hard I work, she thought. This is God showing me He hasn't forgotten me. It was only one night, only after the party was over, so she wouldn't even be gone long. She would still return home to Amelia, tuck her in and spend the morning with her little girl. She smiled for the first time in days, clutching her phone as though the good news might slip away. She couldn't have known that this simple yes, this one job, would place her directly back into the path of the man she had once loved, and the storm of fate waiting to unravel everything she had built. Unknown to Isla, the path she thought was leading her toward relief was instead steering her straight into the storm she had been running from for 6 long years. The night of the party came. The mansion still hummed with echoes of laughter, clinking glasses and music as the last of the guests stumbled out into waiting cars. Then came silence, except for the shuffling of the cleaning crew, summoned like shadows to erase the traces of excess. Isla was handed her task, the pool area. Alone. She moved quickly, as she always did. Her hands worked, sweeping up confetti, gathering empty cups, picking stray napkins from the tiled floor. But her mind wasn't in the room. It was with Amelia. Her little girl had been home for months, waiting, asking when she could go back to school. Isla had lied gently, telling her, "Soon, baby," though her heart ached with each word. Tonight's pay would change that. Tonight, Amelia's education would no longer be on hold. A small smile tugged at Isla's lips. For once, things seemed to be turning in her favor. Then came a voice, deep, familiar, commanding. "Don't forget to pick the waste over by the big box," it said. "Yes, sir," she answered automatically, not even glancing up. She turned to obey, then froze. The voice. Her heart stopped before her body did. Slowly, mechanically, she lifted her gaze. And there, standing across from her like a phantom risen from her worst and most beautiful memories, was Aran Noe. The world seemed to tilt beneath her. Shock hit her bones like ice water. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't move. The man she had loved, the man she had left, the man she had sworn never to face again. He was here. Her mind spun. What was he doing at this party? Why here? Why now? Why her? Then another thought struck, cruel in its clarity. The overtime job. The employer who had specifically requested her. No, it couldn't be. But the way he was staring at her, unblinking, unwavering, made the truth undeniable. He had arranged this. He had found her. Isla Brown. Her name rolled off his tongue like both a curse and a prayer. His voice carried disbelief, anger, and something else, something rawer, more dangerous. "I wondered why I couldn't find you all these years. So," his eyes narrowed, "you changed your last name to Cooper, just to keep me out of your life?" The air between them was heavy, electric. Isla's lips parted, but no words came. She stood frozen, trembling beneath his gaze, while he studied her like a man searching for the truth in a face he had memorized long ago. For someone who said they couldn't be with a criminal. His voice sharpened, cutting through the silence. "But is now reduced to cleaning floors. You don't have anything to say." Each word pierced her like a blade. Finally, she forced her throat to work. "What do you want, Aran?" The question stunned him. "What do I want?" His voice rose, edged with disbelief. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, his eyes dark with emotions too long buried. "You really have to ask me that." His fists clenched at his sides, jaw tight. For years he had carried her ghost. For years he had rehearsed this very moment, imagining the revenge, the bitter words, the satisfaction of seeing her again. Yet now, standing before her, all of that rage had twisted into something else, something more desperate. "What about an explanation, Isla?" His voice cracked, anger colliding with pain. 6 years ago you shattered me. You told me prison was the end, that you couldn't wait for a criminal. You left me when I needed you most. Why?" His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. The mask of the billionaire was gone. In its place stood the same man who had once whispered love to her, who had once held her like she was the only thing in his world. For Aran Noe, the empire, the fortune, the power, all of it meant nothing in this moment. He wanted only one thing, the truth. Every part of Isla wanted to collapse into his arms. Her body ached with the urge to hold him again, to bury her face in the familiar curve of his chest, to inhale the scent that once meant home. She longed to pour out everything she had kept locked inside, 6 years of silent battles, of raising their daughter alone, of living in constant fear under the shadow of his father's threats. Her lips trembled with the words she would never dare to speak. "I never stopped loving you. We have a child. She looks like you." But then it struck her like ice water. Chairman Noe. His words slammed into her memory with cruel precision. "If I can put him in prison once, I can do it again, and I will come after you and whatever family you have left." Her heart constricted. She couldn't let this happen. Not again. Not with Amelia's life at stake. She steadied her voice, masking the storm inside. "What other explanation do you need, Aran? I already told you that day. This is old news." Her words came out cold, clipped, though inside she was breaking all over again. She turned quickly, desperate to flee, desperate to disappear before the danger lurking behind his father's name consumed them both. But Aran wasn't ready to let her go. He stepped forward, blocking her path. Where does she think she's going? His mind churned. Not after everything. Not when I still don't have the truth. They stood inches apart, and suddenly, The air between them shifted. The anger, the fear, the weight of 6 years dissolved in the silent pull of two souls who had never truly let go. Their eyes locked, soft, unguarded, dreamlike. It was as if the years unraveled in a single heartbeat, carrying them back to stolen nights of laughter, to whispered promises beneath the stars, to the kind of love that had once felt unstoppable. The world outside vanished. There was only this moment, fragile and infinite, teetering between past and present. For the first time in 6 years, Isla allowed herself to feel what she had buried. And for the first time in 6 years, Aran forgot the revenge he had sworn, the walls he had built. It was peace. It was longing. It was heartbreak. Then, boss? The low voice of Toby, Aran's ever-watchful right hand, cut through the silence like glass shattering. The spell broke. Reality rushed back, sharp and merciless. Isla's eyes flickered with panic. She seized the moment, turned, and bolted past them. Aran's hand twitched, aching to grab her arm, to pull her back, to demand the truth, but he stood frozen, watching the only woman he had ever loved vanish into the night once again. And this time, she wasn't just running from him. She was running for something far greater, something he didn't yet know existed. Aran stood in silence, the weight of the moment pressing against his chest. For 6 years, he had lived surrounded by laughter, attention, and the hollow affection of women drawn only to his wealth. They laughed at his jokes, hung on to his every word, but none of it reached him. Not once had he felt what he had just felt, standing in front of Isla. Not with the women paraded before him by his father, their smiles sharpened into weapons of business deals. Not with those who fawned over his status, their eyes fixed on the fortune and not the man. No, only Isla. Only her presence had the power to disarm him, to strip him bare. If he had been holding an arrow, Toby would have been his target for breaking that fragile, perfect silence. But Aran only exhaled slowly, forcing calm into his voice. "What is it, Toby?" Toby, unshaken, reported that representatives of a company were waiting at Aran's residence to finalize terms of a major deal. But Aran didn't care. Not tonight. Not after that. His mind spiraled, tangled in Isla's name. Isla. How could she still undo him so completely? He had carried anger for her, bottled it like poison, waiting to pour it over her when they finally crossed paths. For years he had imagined the moment, imagined the revenge, the bitter satisfaction, and yet when it finally came, the anger evaporated. All that remained was longing. He stared at the ground, his voice low, thoughtful. "Toby, is it possible to love and hate someone at the same time? Is it possible to feel this strongly about a person you haven't seen in 6 years?" Toby hesitated, measuring his words. "I can't speak for your heart, sir. But if there's one thing I know, it's that anything is possible when it comes to matters of love." Aran fell into silence again, lost in thought. His chest tightened. He knew what he wanted now. He needed the truth, every last fragment of it. His gaze sharpened. Find her. Everything. Every detail about Isla Brown. I want it all. Toby bowed his head. "Yes, sir."
That brings us to the end of part 1 of the story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. I know you're eager for more. The second part will be out very soon. In the meantime, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the storyline, the characters, or maybe your favorite scene so far? Drop your comments below. I always look forward to reading them. And if you'd like to support the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really means a lot. See you in part 2.